Hello and welcome to the Leaders Council podcast, the podcast for the people who run the country and the people who keep the country running. You join us on yet another sunny day here in this empty capital of ours. I'm Matthew O'Neill, and today, as always, we ensure that we have a variety of distinct perspectives on leadership. First, we're joined by Mark Hodgkinson, Director of Operations of CFone Communications, a telecommunications company based in Middlesex. Mark, hello.
Hello, Matthew. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you for coming on the program today. Now, normally we charge headlong into the subject of leadership, but considering the odd circumstances we find ourselves under, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, how has COVID-19 affected your business?
That's a very good question, Matthew, and it has affected our business massively. We are in the travel industry, well, our customers are in the travel industry, and when the announcement of the airports being closed, our customers saw a huge decrease in their income. And as such, that had an adverse effect on us. So what we did was, rather than put our heads under the pillow and panic, we started a series of contacting our customers, explaining to them how we can help them, whether it's through gaining grants, looking at furloughing staff, looking at their services they offer at the moment, and how perhaps they could change those services. If you've got a taxi industry, for example, and you're delivering people, but the people are afraid to use the taxis, then all you've got to do is look at your resource, your taxis, look at where the fish where the fish are, look at where the revenue is coming in. So what we did, we said to our customers, go and talk to the hotels, go and talk to the restaurants, become a delivery service, look at all the NHS trusts, offer to move staff around, even if it's for free to begin with. Look at how you can distribute PPE equipment and testing kits throughout the UK. So in terms of advising customers, our customers are key, and we've been actively helping them maintain a normal level of business. And that has really been one of the biggest impacts. And then for our own business, we've also started looking at new ways of socially doing social SEO, looking at marketing, whether it's on radio, TV, billboards. All these things are new to us at the moment, but we've started to investigate, looking at all the different types of advertising. I myself have now developed a YouTube channel. So I think the pressure was a good thing, and the massive reset that the COVID crisis has caused on us has given us all time to reflect and to reevaluate our businesses.
So you think in the long term for business, this could be a positive, making people generate new ideas and new practices?
Absolutely, Matthew. Absolutely. You couldn't have said it better. I would say initially, everyone in industry probably panicked, and that's natural. Nobody knew what was around the corner. Nobody could have predicted in January that the airlines would be closed, that cities would be desolate, and that Disneyland would have closed its gates. No one could have said that. But the good truth is that this is a cycle. Looking back in history, there have been many disasters like this, and what history has taught us is that in times of crisis, having these massive resets where you can evaluate how you react and how you can change what you do, and really have a big positive effect on how you strive coming out the other side of this crisis. And I honestly can say, hand on heart, that this has been one of the most empowering and positive experiences for our company inside of this crisis, where we are connecting to new people we wouldn't have ever dreamt of speaking to before on a daily basis, and it really is a positive experience.
Well, it's fantastic to hear that amidst all this misery, that there can be some positive effects to it. It gives some hope for the future for business. We should move on to the subject of leadership. I always like to start this part of the conversation off by asking the same simple question. What does the word leader mean to you?
In times of crisis, a lot of people go into their shells, and leaders have the ability to get those people out of it, as I've explained what we've been doing with our customers. They look at a crisis and pin it on the wall. They say they have the right attitude. They say, I can't change it. I can't change this right now, but I'm going to do something positive about it. And I think it's leaders that have the ability to adjust their sails when there is no wind, rather than just saying there's no wind, nothing's happening. We'll just have to wait. We'll bunker down. That's not what a leader does. A leader looks around and says, what can I get out of this situation? How can I tap into my team and motivate them? And strong leaders have the ability to have empathy with their peers and listen to their team. And when the pressure is on their team, sometimes good ideas come out of it, and it's good leaders have the ability to convert those ideas into actions that galvanize the organization and help them achieve their vision.
What would you say is the most important trait of a leader?
Certainly demonstrating empathy towards your peers is very important. Making sure your team is focused beyond the crisis. As I said before, this is an evolution, this is a cycle. We're not going to be in the COVID crisis forever. So having the vision to look above the parapet and seeing what's ahead. Motivation. It's a personal choice, and identifying in your team what motivates people. That's really key because everyone's different. We all have acted differently, whether we're working from home or in the office. So listening for those critical cues from your team and using them to tap into what makes them successful, I think, are important qualities for all leaders.
Let's go back to the beginning of your career when you first started out your working life. Did you have any role models who shaped you as you are today?
Yes. At the beginning of our career, if I'd like to rewind a little bit before that, CFone was created many years ago out of necessity by my parents. My father trained in the radio electronics industry, and my mother in bookkeeping background. They began by repairing electrical goods and learning how to create good customer relations with their customers. Then they began to branch out into assembling TV aerials. Business grew, and with my father's knowledge of aerials and specialist radio, he began erecting specialized areas all over the world. And although this wasn't going to be forever, my parents decided there'll be a time for change. So they moved into two-way radio. At first, they bought and sold radios, and however, they noticed that in the 70s, supply and demand chain used to regularly dry up. So the idea of buying had to be shelved, and they got the idea of designing their own two-way radios, which were manufactured and used all over the planet, in fact. Business boomed in the 80s, and my parents always adapted as technology changed and mindsets changed, and that amazed me. To come back to your question, and in fact, they dabbled in producing, by today's standards, a hefty-looking mobile phone. We had mobile phones in our vehicles before that people had mobile phones in vehicles. They worked on radio technology. But as world companies started manufacturing abroad, the manufacturing side of the business ceased, and business declined in one technology, but it re-evolved and changed and grew into another. And now my brother and I, we're embracing new technologies with our approach to our customers' care and giving honest appraisal and doing our best to assist our customers in becoming successful, because it's their success which is our success.
Now, unfortunately, our time together has drawn to its close. But before I let you go, what does the next 12 months have in store for CFone Communications?
Well, like I said before, we've utilised and adapted existing technologies as lessons learned from my parents by helping our customers and our staff working from home, the office in isolation and safety. By listening to our customers, we are offering positive information on how to diversify their businesses and offering them ideas which can be uplifting. Talk to them regularly, and we've offered them assistance in terms of how to apply for grants, bank loans, business interruption loans, and we're now looking at other opportunities further afield. VoIP has a massive opportunity in this all over the planet, in fact, but in this country, it has a massive opportunity where existing people had a phone system and it was in their building, and we were all furloughed, and then we ran to the hills and we went and worked from home. Some people adopted new technologies. We are now seeing questions being asked by our customers: how can we merge the two? How can we integrate the two? Only yesterday, I was talking to Microsoft in Istanbul about how we can integrate their team technology, Microsoft Teams, with VoIP cloud telephony, because our customers are asking those questions. School only the other day said to me, we were using phones at home at school. Now we've gone home. We're teaching the children from home. We're using Teams, using Zoom, using podcasts. How can we get those two to integrate? Because when we go back, when this cycle changes, and when we're all back together, the world is going to be a different place. Some of our staff will be working remotely. Some of our staff will be working in offices. And I think over the next 12 months will be a very interesting time to see how the technologies merge and evolve.
Well, Mark, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the program, and I do hope that you can come back on when things get back to some semblance of normalcy. Mark, thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. It's been a fantastic opportunity for CFone, and thank you for the time listening to me.
That was Mark Hodgkinson, Director of Operations of CFone Communications. And now, if you haven't heard it before, is Jonathan White's exclusive interview with Sir Geoff Hurst.
We're now joined, though, by former England footballer and still the only man to score a hat-trick in a World Cup final, Sir Geoff Hurst. Thank you very much for coming on today.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Good afternoon.
And perhaps I should start and get it over and done with. I know you must be bored with it, and you've probably been asked 1,000 times. But when you got out for a duck playing for Essex, Geoff, what was going through your head at the time?
Well, of course, that's not one of the most asked questions I get. Oh, there are one or two people who are very familiar who do Google me, who realise that I did score nothing for Essex. My only game for Essex first team when we played against Lancashire in Liverpool, a place called Egbert in Liverpool, many, many years ago, 1962, I think that was. So I didn't, I didn't really feel it at the time. It was lucky to be playing, I guess. There were one or two injuries. But the problem that I had was really messing about between the two sports. That was very detrimental to me over that period of time, being stuck between the two sports.
And I think for those that don't know, there's another world that might exist where Sir Geoff Hurst was a first-class cricketer and not perhaps a footballer. But whether it's business or cricket or football, obviously the importance of leadership, it can't be understated, no matter what form that comes in. When you were at West Ham, Geoff, and when Ron Greenwood first came along, he made obviously some pretty radical changes. Was this a man that genuinely inspired confidence the first time you'd meet him?
Absolutely. I mean, he was simply a fantastic coach or teacher, if you like, at football. And the quite always mentioned when we talk about Ron Greenwood, Harry Redknapp, who was played under him and has been very successful as a player and the manager over many, many, many years. He's come across many coaches, of course, and managers during his time over years, I guess. He would still say that Ron Greenwood is the best coach he'd worked with. So you're very fortunate. I think you think you're lucky when you come across, if you have a great teacher at school and a great coach, as we had in Ron Greenwood, and of course a great manager in Sir Alf Ramsey. So to come across people like that, of that calibre, can have a huge influence on your career, of course, and then your life. And that's quite purely the case.
Absolutely. And in those early days at West Ham, with a manager like Ron there, it's also important to have confidence with your other players, and of course they become your friends. Who did you look to at the time when to inspire confidence in yourself? Was it Peters?
I think probably, well, I was very fortunate to play with the calibre of the players I did. Again, extremely fortunate to play with the captain of England and West Ham, and Martin Peters, who was a fantastic player. And as far as Martin's concerned, I think sometimes he didn't quite get the recognition he deserved. What a wonderful player he was. In terms of inspiring confidence, I always probably say that the biggest influence for me, I guess, would be the captain, Bob Moore. Although he was only about 8 months older than me, he graduated through the system probably 3 or 4 years earlier. He played for England in 62, 4 years before the final when I played. And so he was more, looked upon him more as a senior player, if you like, not as a guy with the same age group as me. And I looked at how he trained, how he acted, how he behaved, and how he played. And so he would say, I would also say he was a big influence on me. One thing I would say about leadership, what I do understand clearly in all walks of life, leadership is at the top, is absolutely vital for a business, a football team, in any walk of life to be successful. And it's quite evident. I was in the motor trade for a long time as well, selling car warranties to car dealerships. And you could almost tell when you walked into the business, many of the car dealerships, you could almost tell from the moment you walked in by initial reaction, people came and welcomed you, that the business was well run or conversely not well run at all. And so I understand the value and quality of leadership. And that's why I'm very fortunate to be involved in my career in those early days with two great leaders in Ron Greenwood and Alf Ramsey.
Absolutely. And since you've already brought him up, Jeff, I think it'd be remiss not to go a little bit further with that. But obviously, after at West Ham, your playing came to the attention of Sir Alf Ramsey. Now, there's a man I'm sure when you walked into a room, you knew who was in charge. When it came to managing that England team, what was his style like, Jeff?
Well, the first thing I say about Alf Ramsey, he's probably over my life the most powerful influence who had on me as a person. Naturally, it happens to an extent because he's got your whole career in his hand. Whether he picks you for England or he doesn't pick you, it can have a great impact on your career and, of course, your life. But in that era, I was involved for 6 or 7 years. It was quite clear who was the boss. He was quite very, very strict. Probably at a time, maybe overly strict, but at a time you probably wouldn't necessarily get away with it in today's football because it's changed dramatically in how you deal with players then and players now. But he was the most powerful man I came across, and very few people. And he was quite ruthless in getting people out who didn't want to be part of a group, part of a team. It is important that if you've got a group of people, and that's in any walk of life, they're all singing off the same hymn sheet, and you don't have anybody that's griping or moaning about the system. And if you've got people like that in your organisation, one thing I have learned, and I've taken it on in my life, my family, you've got somebody in the group that doesn't want to be part of it, you get them out. And Alf, I think, was quite ruthless with that in his staff. And I think that's one of the most serious things I think I've learnt over a long period of time. And
is there, do you think, a specific moment, I'm sure there's probably dozens, but is there a specific moment, if you could perhaps pick right now, that did show those qualities in Sir Alf so sharply?
Yes, I think for me, certainly, I think there are instances of players who you thought would be in the team or certainly in the squad, and surprising they were not. There was no necessary reason for it, but looking back, I do think perhaps they were people that Alf didn't think wanted to be part of a group. So that's for me. In terms of my personal view, I think that it looked prior to the World Cup that I was going to be playing in it only a few games before. I was playing, and I played with Jimmy Greaves in a game against Yugoslavia only a couple of months before the final. And it looked at that stage as if I was going to be playing in the team. But in a couple of more friendly games before the final in Poland and Norway, I think, and Denmark, I played 2 of the 4 games, and I probably didn't quite replicate my form that I'd been showing at West Ham and in the early couple of games for England. And he left me out in the first game of the World Cup against Uruguay. He started off with Jimmy Greaves and Roger Hunt. So I had an impact of thinking at that stage I was going to play, and didn't start because of just a lack of form. I didn't play quite well enough to justify my position. And somewhat fortuitously, I only got back in the team because of a nasty gash to shin on Jimmy Greaves' leg.
And I think what you've said there, Jeff, actually does sum that up really well. And more than that, whilst it's important to have that someone in charge with those qualities, it's almost useless if there isn't a strong and unified team behind them. And there really must have been moments, Jeff, maybe there weren't, but let us know, in that 66 competition, the prolonged pressure on all of you, the weight of a nation, did it get to you?
Oh, not for me personally, no. I think, and I don't, not for me, not for a second. I think I was just happy to be involved in the squad initially. Not at all. You're not aware of the magnitude of the occasion, really, looking back out. So I never really felt, people talk about pressure a lot, and it's there, and people talk about it in life. I didn't really necessarily feel any great pressure during the time I was there. And what is also important to say about Alf Ramsey, the people he left behind that were left in the squad after he moved 1 or 2 players out, the squad were a bunch of very hard-nosed, professional, top-quality people. And that was, again, the leadership that Al showed. He got people in together that were very, very strong personally. And I think that was part of the success we had. We were I always describe our group as hard-nosed professionals. We have some great players, but overall they were great hard-nosed professional players. And great quality people who we've kept in contact with, over the years.
And Jeff, I've got to ask, and I'm not making this up, I've genuinely heard that people do ask you whether or not you realise there were people on the pitch at that moment. I imagine you were busy on something else. Well,
I did some theatre shows last year. They've gone fairly well, and we're going to do a series of theatre shows, in fact, starting this week, over the next 2 or 3 months. And at the end of the theatre shows, we have about 20 minutes where we allow the people in the audience to ask questions. And I won't mention both. They're too long to talk about both questions. The other one's a really stupid one. It's too long for me to tell you. It's absolutely ridiculous. But the other ridiculous question I get asked, did I realise there were people on the pitch? And of course, I jokingly say, yes, I was just about to shoot to score the goal. And I looked round, put my foot on the ball, and looked round for a little while and said, oh dear, there are 6 or 7 people running on the pitch. So I've been asked that once at one of the theatre shows. So I make a joke about that and saying, yes, I put my foot on the ball and waited to just have a glance round,
Maybe it does prove there are things such as stupid questions, really.
Oh, yeah, there certainly are. I've got another one which I won't bore you with. It's too long to tell you. I was in a Jersey or Channel Line, Jersey or Guernsey 2 or 3 years ago, and most stupid, irrelevant questions, absolutely nothing to do with football whatsoever, which was absolutely. But I can use that now because it is quite funny.
Well, maybe another time then. But we.
Well, I can tell you if you want. You got time? I can tell you if you want.
Jeff, go on. Go. I think it would be silly if I said no at this point.
Okay, so I was doing at a dinner in the Channel Lines, 300 or 400 people, black tie dinner, guest of honour. And this occasion I was speaking for about 20 minutes, then allowing questions from the audience at the end of the evening. And there was usual football questions. And then all of a sudden I heard somebody at the back who who asked the question. I didn't quite hear what he said. He didn't have the microphone with him, so I said, I didn't hear what he said. Can you please give this chap the microphone so I can hear clearly what he said? So the chap had the mic, and he said, when a turtle loses its shell, is it naked or is it homeless?
Right. What a question. What a question.
I think that would be definitely in the stupid category, wouldn't it? So we had a laugh about that.
You've got to have a patient of a saint, I think, sometimes to put up with things like that. But then again,
I found it amusing. I just found it amusing. In fact, some of the audience found it highly amusing as well. So it did make me laugh that day.
If you can put up with my questions, you can probably put up with anything. But there would have become a point, though, Jeff, I think you were a young man when obviously this happened, when you must have realised that teammates, began looking at you for leadership. Is that something that occurred to you, or did you just realise that by one way or the other, people actually begin to look up for you for inspiration?
Well, possibly. That's never really struck me until you've actually mentioned it now, quite frankly. That's a new question. Does anybody look up to me? I'm sure perhaps there are people who pay you compliments of fans of West Ham and Stoke, and of course England fans who I think probably it would be very immodest of me to suggest that I felt that somebody was looking to me for inspiration.
You don't have to, but I will.
It's okay for a third party to do it. Perhaps that may have been the case over the years. People look at you and maybe it has a helpful effect. But I do think you how you behave and set examples on and off the pitch, people must realise that has an influence. How you react and behave to situations on and off the field surely probably has an impact to younger players coming into the team latterly.
And with that, looking at football today, is there anybody that you think particularly on the field or the sidelines that strikes you as someone with those qualities that you could identify in a natural leader?
Current players, you mean?
Oh, players, managers, anybody that you look to today, really?
Well, I think some of the outstanding. I think the best example about a leader at the moment is Klopp at Liverpool. He has been absolutely fantastic to acquire the players and get them to. Their attitude is absolutely fantastic. They're great players, but there's more than just being good players in football. It is have a good player with a fantastic attitude, and their willingness to work for each other and the team is absolutely outstanding. Hence these unbelievable results. There are, and the great players not always succeed as individuals, or probably even certainly as a team if you haven't got the right attitude alongside it. And they're probably, and that comes through the leadership. That's not just luck. That's absolute leadership. He'd be the best example, of course, in football terms today, easily. And of course, but going back not that long ago, Alex Ferguson is just absolutely. You've got to take him as the first example, because Klopp's only done this over a period of time, a short period of time. But if you look at the 26, 27 years that Alex Ferguson did with Manchester United, and subsequently since he's gone, how they are not doing so well. He's the best example of management we've probably ever seen, and I don't think anybody will see the like of that kind of leadership again. It's absolutely astonishing.
And do you think? Could you imagine Sir Alf or even Ron Greenwood managing teams today?
Yes, I think so. I think yes, no question at all. I think Ron Greenwood. Yeah, well, the answer, straightforward answer is yes.
Good answer.
The straightforward answer is yes. I can elaborate as much as you want, but the straight answer is absolutely categorically yes.
And with I know if we could talk about this probably for the next hour or so, but I'm conscious of the time. Looking back through your playing career, perhaps especially your time for England, who was it that struck you more than anyone else on the pitch that displayed qualities of not just leadership but companionship and level-headedness that you think that have stuck with you all these years later?
Well, I think I was very fortunate, and I wouldn't pick any one player out. I think looking at that,
so many,
and that's why we were successful, because we had so many showing all those qualities that you just mentioned throughout the team. I think that was outstanding, and it's an opportunity to talk about all of them in that breath. And there was nobody, and going back from an earlier question for me, all hard-nosed professionals, good teammates, good socially, and that's why we kept in touch with each other on our golf days every year up until about 5 years ago. Of course, with the sadly dwindling numbers, we still got on. Our wives got on all together all those years later. It didn't just finish after '66. That reunion, that camaraderie, that team spirit, getting on with each other lasted for a long time. And I wouldn't, when you put those questions and how you categorise those, I would pick every one of the 11 players who you put in that category that were like that. There was nobody else. They were all outstanding. And I think that was a big part. I can't stress how big a part that was. And I've said that many times, for the success of the team. We had some great players. We had some great players, of course. But without the attitude alongside that, going back to an earlier question, we wouldn't have been as ultimately as successful.
Exactly. Without that, the whole will never be greater than the sum of its parts. But with it,
yes, the word is team. The word is team.
Absolutely.
And I always use the word team when I talk. Sometimes together, everyone achieves more, and that's the same in any walk of life. That's fundamental.
And lastly, Jeff, looking, if you were to give advice, and whether this is in sport or business or indeed any other walk of life, what would you identify, if you can, as the key tenet that you can't go without in terms of leading a team, no matter what that team is?
Single-mindedness, dedication to the job, thinking about that role, that job in leadership all the time. It's a huge part of your life. I don't think you can switch off when you're in business at the top level or sport at the top level. You may, have a couple of weeks holiday, but I'm even sure if these top managers and leaders in all walks of life are away on holiday on a beach somewhere warm, I'm sure they will not switch off for 2 weeks and completely not think about their role as the boss of an organisation. And I think you're completely focused. You're always thinking about things, thinking about improvements, and it's just dedication and tuning your life to being successful.
Excellent. Well, Jeff, on that point, thank you very much for joining us today.
You're welcome. Very good nice to have a talk about this and just go over the past and just refresh my own memory about the quality of the players I grew up with.
Excellent. Another time, it would be great to talk again.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you.
This has been the Leaders Council podcast. Thank you for celebrating excellence in leadership with us. I have been your host, Matthew O'Neill. Until next time, goodbye. Thank you for listening to our podcast. The views expressed within the podcast do not reflect the views of the Leaders Council of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, its parent company or subsidiaries, members of staff, other guests, or any other person therein associated.